Morning glory and evening grace, America. It's Friday, April 4th. I'm Hugh. It's the Week in Review show. Coming up next hour, of course, Dr. Larry Arnn on the Hillsdale Dialogue. We'll look at the tariff fallout. The market is closed. I'll bring you up to speed at the bottom. But I have Ben Domenech for about 20 minutes, so I want to get right to Ben, editor-at-large at The Spectator, Fox News contributor. Ben, welcome. I concluded last hour talking with Matt Continetti about a story about the border. Chuck Grassley, God love him, brought it to the floor, or I wouldn't have known about it. The IG at Homeland Security put out a report. During the 4 years of Joe Biden, we know that 448,000 unaccompanied minors crossed the border, and they vanished into the country to various places. We lost 31,000 of them. 48,000 of them did not come back for their appointment with the immigration authorities. 223,000 of them never got an appointment with the immigration authorities. And that doesn't even begin to account for those that we didn't have any contact with. It's horrific. It's not getting any news given the tariffs and the market sell-off. But what do you think of that? That Trump closed the border. That did not have to happen. It's a human tragedy.
Well, I mean, I think one of the issues that you're dealing with there is that even that is just an initial calculation, because the after effects of that number of people, the cascade of violence, crime, and other incidents that follow through is something that is always, frankly, uninteresting to the major national media sources that could track such things down. And it's also something that is uninteresting to the powers that be when Democrat administrations are in charge. So that's one of the reasons why I think, you can only deal with the numbers of the people that are measurable, and that includes those folks who never show up. One of the things that I think we're learning about the case that was blown up in the Atlantic about the Maryland father is the term, which is, I think, the new replacement for a noted cleric, or however you want to refer to it. This Maryland father who got sent to El Salvador. Well, the initial story, of course, sounded quite damning. But one of the things that, very quickly emerged is that this is someone who's been here illegally since 2012, and someone who had already been, forced to appear before the court multiple times. And had also been tagged for not showing up multiple times, and basically had been in a situation where they made the claim that they could not be returned to El Salvador because of a criminal dispute. But then it turns out that upon further investigation, it's because of a criminal dispute because they're a member of MS-13 and there's a rival gang. So guess what? That's not the kind of person that we want here in America, and they're going to turn these types of stories into sob stories because they're desperate to find them. But the truth is that the actual record of this is a total indictment of the Biden administration, the choices that were made by Alejandro Mayorkas. It's why I supported his impeachment, by the way, and we can talk about impeachment, but it's one of these things where, I truly believe that if you are someone who simply is not doing your job, you cannot do your job, then I believe that you are violating your oath of office, and in that refusal, you are someone who can be removed by the Congress, through the due process and under law. But this is the type of situation that could have been avoided, and the after effects of it, as I said, are incalculable in terms of the number of lives that are going to be affected by the presence of all of these people, by what they are doing here, and what they are doing, by the way, continually in order to pay back the cartels that got them here during particularly the Biden administration.
Yeah, what I mostly fear for the children that have been completely lost, and some of them were 17 or 18 years old, and they'll be adults, but a lot of them were 10, and we saw a lot of small kids. We just don't know what's happened to them. And
no. And that's not something you're not going to find an estimate for that, Hugh.
No,
it's not the GAO. The IGs. They don't have the capacity to estimate the kind of damage that is being done to these children, and it's something that we're only going to learn in the future, and only in recollection and in frankly the sad after effects of crime and of rampant criminality that has taken over major portions of American cities under sanctuary city laws and under the kinds of policies that the Democratic Party has supported for years, and that I think Republicans have railed against, but have done not enough prior to President Trump.
The second story that will probably get wiped out by the tariffs and the market panic, and it's a panic. I've been through so many panics. I know a panic when I see it, and it'll recorrect again over the course of a month or so. But lost in that, the book by John Allen and Amy Parnes called Fight.
Oh, Lord.
I spent an hour with them. It's on my YouTube channel. We aired it on the Salem News Channel. It's stunning how many people knew he was cognitively impaired.
Well, I've had my my news appetite consumed by the same issues related to the tariffs, so I haven't checked out your YouTube video yet, but I will. But the reporting and the excerpts that I have seen are astounding, and they are an absolute, I think, indictment of the Democratic brass that knew that this was going on, that pretended very much that it was not happening, and that then had to scramble when proof positive was put in front of the American people that it was happening. And even that, I think, even short of that, consider this, Hugh. Without that debate happening when it happened, imagine the scenario where Biden just refuses to debate. Imagine a scenario where he just says, I'm not going to go on stage with Donald Trump. He's, someone who, contested an election and blah, 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 or enemy of democracy, whatever excuse he wanted to pick. Imagine a situation where he did that and had a reasonable chance of winning the presidency again. What would we be doing right now? What would we be facing as a country in terms of his current mental state? Would he just be sleeping on the beach again, for as many weeks as possible? I mean, it's absolutely abhorrent. And I think, again, this is not about partisanship. I want a functional president.
Yeah. Anita Dunn, by the way, was the one that recommended no debates because she knew what could happen and did happen. Ron Klain pushed for him. I don't know Ron well. We were colleagues for a while at the Post. Exchange emails. I think he's very smart, but I think he left because of this. He's not said that, but I think he left because he saw that.
I think that is a very valid suspicion, Hugh, and I would not be surprised if that was the case. There are certain people who I believe, will be telling this story over the course of the next couple of years in ways that only enlighten us more and make our eyes, raise in terms of the kind of things that were going on internally that needed to be, made public to the American people a long time ago. One thing that I would point out about this, though, is it is such an example of only now the truth can be told, meaning that we have dealt with so many of these storylines over the past couple of years, whether it was about COVID, whether it was about lockdowns, whether it was about the different nature of decisions that were made. We have dealt with one story after another where people will be screaming in the moment and called out as being extremists or dealing in misinformation or disinformation or something of the like. And then a year or two later, and usually that's about the timeline, you suddenly have this flood of the same people who were condemning those folks and the same institutions that were condemning those ideas as being unacceptable to be printed, basically going back and doing a look back where they say, well, actually now upon further investigation, we can say these crazy people had a point.
Well, yeah, I told an audience this week that in 1972, Gallup showed that 70% of Americans trusted media. Today, that's 31%. Do you think it's ever going to rebound to even 40 or 50%, Ben?
I honestly don't. I actually think that the one hope that we have for a rebound is simply the explosion of new entities that are online that have already, proven their capability of getting to the bottom of some of these things. But I also think that there's just a level of denialism about these different storylines. I mean, one that was probably the most recent that is continuing to a certain extent, though I think the Brits are ahead of the curve on this, is the argument about, of course, the treatment of young children for gender dysphoria and the like that is rooted in extremely bad and unfounded science. And that's the kind of thing that I think, in the next couple of years from now, people are going to be saying, well, hey, Europe is actually right about the UK is ahead of this. They figured out that this was a bad idea, and we had all these reports, and we were unwilling to admit it because of local domestic politics and the like. But that is one more area where I think people pretend that these problems don't exist until the point where it's impossible for them to pretend anymore.
Right.
And
stay tuned. I got to take the break from the Salem News Channel and some of my affiliates down the road. I'll talk with Ben during the break, put it on the Highly Concentrated Hugh podcast and on the YouTube channel, and then he'll be back after the break because I'm going to talk with him about the tariffs and the market during the break. That's been talked to about to death. But I'm going to talk with him about Iran after the break, and I think he's one of the serious people out there paying attention to what I'm paying attention to, so stay tuned. I'm back now with Ben Domenech. Ben, what do you make of the tariffs and the market reaction?
So I think that this is one of the most predictable situations that we could have had, and yet somehow people were in denial about it. When on the actual day that the president was sworn in, I was doing the coverage on Fox, and I said, I think the real challenge for this presidency is going to be the economy, because I think that, on foreign policy, I think he can make some very quick moves. On the border, I think he can make some very quick moves, as we've seen, that are going to have significant, positive policy ramifications away from the Biden agenda. But that when it came to the economy, the big problem for him was going to be, one, people were thoroughly optimistic about his ability to put things back in place that would make the economy roar again, as it did under his first administration. And that, secondly, he was bent on a tariff regime, a tariff agenda that struck me as being much more far-reaching than people were accounting for, and potentially, one that could put us in the kind of panic that you just referenced. This is something that I think is a big bet on the part of the president. I personally do not like tariffs. I've never liked tariffs. As you know, I'm a Rand Paul, Thomas Massey guy on that kind of thing. I think that they are only useful to bring people to a negotiation table, and effectively what it seems like he's trying to do is to bring everyone in the world to a negotiation table. And I think the problem with that is the pain is front-loaded. For a lot of these industries, they do not have the capability to move quickly. They do not have the ability to move back into the American economy the way that they would need to. And also, of course, there are the beckoning interests of other nations around the world that can tempt them to go in different directions. And so one of the things that I think is going to have to happen here is either these deals are going to have to happen quickly, and they're going to have to be ones that are bilateral or that are, with groups of nations that the president has confidence in, and that, he's going to support himself, and that other nations have the confidence in as well. Otherwise, we're going to be stuck in a significant, I think, amount of economic pain for a period of time that is indeterminate. And that indeterminate period of time could end up dramatically affecting Republicans in the midterms, who I think are very frustrated by this. They were hoping he was going to do something more modest. I think this is also cultural, though. I mean, we hear what we hear from J.D. Vance about the need to restore the type of American industry that we had in the past. Well, again, that's not something that happens overnight. And a lot of those people who need to be educated in the trades and be able to do the types of jobs, working with their hands and working with the kind of mechanisms that they need to, they're in 8th and 9th grade right now. They're not ready to go. And that's a big problem for the American economy and for the American people, and I'm not sure that the people around the president or certainly Republicans in Congress have confidence that that's going to be something that's going to be resolved anytime soon.
I want to underscore what Ben said at the beginning there. I agree with most of what he said. Donald Trump, this is from the Financial Times 6-7 hours ago. Donald Trump triggers race to offer U.S. concessions before tariffs hit. Nations prepare offers to Washington, including weapons deals, dropping their own tariffs and moves against China. That's the best case scenario. We'll see about that. I'll be right back with Ben on air. Welcome back, America. I want to finish my time with Ben Domenech today talking about the fact that a half dozen B-2s have flown to Diego Garcia, at least, we know at least 6, along with refueling tankers and the sort of support aircraft that can help them overfly Iran. Same time, a second carrier group is in the Gulf. We've deployed A-10s, which is unusual. We've also sent anti-missile batteries to Bahrain and other places in the near Iran, Middle East. Ben, I think we're on a clock because you can't leave those. Someone pointed out to me, it's very expensive to do the double deployment of carriers. It's also very exposed to leave the B-2s at Diego Garcia. We can't do that. What do you think is going on?
I mean, I think this is as ramped up as it's been. I mean, this is a situation that is untenable, and so because of that, I think that your suspicions, which I know that we discussed a little bit last week, that we are headed toward an actual significant strike against Iran is very high, and what that does to the global scenario, and especially amidst all of the different negotiations that have been happening regarding the war in Ukraine and with Russia and with obviously China around this that are happening behind the scenes, those aspects of this could be really thrown into a cocked hat if you end up in a situation where you have this going on at the same time. Now, maybe this is a play where that type of threat is being pressed there as something that will attract their attention and concern those other nations that have relationships with Iran. But one of the things that I think we have to consider in this moment is that we don't really have a clear idea yet, as early as it is in this presidency, about who the driving force is when it comes to American foreign policy and national security. We know who the people are, obviously, but we also know that there's different dynamics that are at work here behind the scenes about who is most trusted, who's up, who's down. And that's, a tea leaf reading thing that normally we have a little more time to work with. And we don't, I mean, as someone who's reporting about this actively, I mean, there are basically three pieces I tried to get written this week, I will say, about some of the things that have been going on behind the scenes at the National Security Council and elsewhere that I got to the brink and couldn't get because, there's just not enough on-record stuff. But off-record stuff, there's a lot going on behind the scenes in terms of jockeying up and down and who's trying to get pole position on what ought to be done about Iran. Yeah. And so I'm just not sure how confident we can be about who is in the lead on that.
What is on record is what the president said on Air Force One, which is Netanyahu may be here next week. They coming soon, maybe here next week. At the same time, Gadi Taba, an Israeli journalist, sat down with Prime Minister Netanyahu, and I had to read the subtitles because it was in Hebrew. But it turns out there was a lot of disagreements with Team Biden. Biden, whoever was running Biden's shot, they were really anti-Israel. They really did not want them to win that war. And that's changed. There's no daylight now, Netanyahu and Trump. If there's one person that Trump's going to listen to in the world and take advice from, I think it's probably Bibi Netanyahu. What do you think?
I completely agree, and I think that that's an indication that, essentially when we listen to him, and sometimes you do have to go and do the subtitle read, and I've done that before myself with him, you will be hearing, I think, essentially from his lips to Trump's ears. And that's, something that should give people a lot of expectations about how aggressive this administration is willing to be with Iran.
All right, last question, Ben Domenech. You're about the age of my kids. I never give financial advice to anyone outside of my family. But what I have told them is don't sell anything ever. In your life, you will go through at least 3 or 4 market crashes. In 1987, I was in the government when Black Friday happened. Then we had the dot-com bubble. Then we had 2008, and now we've got this. And there's another one in COVID. There are 5, actually, in my adult life. So maybe I should tell him 5. How do you feel about it as a young dad?
I feel a little more optimistic, just simply because I'm assuming that I have a little more cell life, on some of this. But one of the things that I would say to people is, I think it's a mistake to overreact. One of the questions that I've gotten about, should I rush out and buy a car? Should I rush out and do this, that, or the other? I think overreacting to things like this is almost always turns out to be a bad idea. And while there are people, who will tell you otherwise, I think, Hugh, your experience is one of the reasons that I feel the same way, which is more confidence in staying the course. And frankly, I bet on America, and I bet on America time and again, and I haven't lost. So it's I think a challenge for a lot of people, especially those who are closer to retirement. But I do not think panic is warranted.
Good and wonderful words to close on, Ben Domenech. Thank you. Follow him at B. Domenech. You can also get his podcast over at the Fox News Podcast Central. And I appreciate it, Ben.